Welcome to Homegrown Tales, a live storytelling event held at Bews, 2 Piney Spring in Eureka Springs. The following was recorded December 6th, 2023. And now here's Zeek Taylor to introduce the program.
Hello and welcome. My co-producer Sandra Spotts and I welcome you to Homegrown Tales. Sandra and I are excited to be joined by guest storyteller Pearl Brick.
Thank you so much for coming. We're so glad to have you here. And I want to remind you that the stories that you'll be hearing tonight are all true stories that were lived and written by the tellers. The Missouri Ozarks is both home and backdrop to the ever-popular musician Mick Bird. He's a Missouri Arts Council touring performer and member of the Missouri Blues Society. And he's also a member of the Tennessee Songwriters Association International and has performed at the legendary Bluebird Cafe in Nashville for over 20 years. An award from Billboard magazine kicked off his music career in 1994. 11 recordings later, Mick brings fans an amazing array of original roots rock, country, and his signature Ozark blues. Whether he's in his travels across Missouri, the United States, or Ireland, people everywhere find common ground in Mick's music. And now, here's Mick Bird.
There's no black, no white, but it's just the blues. Amen.
Amen.
Let's hear it again from Mick. Yeah. So good. And I'm supposed to introduce Sandra tonight. I totally forgot to include that in the script. She said, just say her name and say yada, yada, yada. But
Whatever.
yeah, but I'll tell you a little bit about her, what I know. She is a veteran storyteller that appeared on the Tales from the South NPR radio show several times. She's written for several publications, and besides being a great storyteller, she's also a really good abstract artist. So here's my friend. I could tell you more, but some things she won't want me to tell, I don't think. We've shared too many secrets. Here's my friend, Sandra Spotts.
Thank you, Zeke, for not telling those special stories. Tonight I'm reading, this is actually an encore reading of a story that I've read here before. It's about one of my favorite people that used to be on this earth. It's called Divinity. It was December 23rd, and that meant one thing. I had an appointment with Glenn to get my annual Christmas hairdo, even though there was so much else to do. I rushed into the salon, stressed out and in a foul mood. My head was swimming with errands, baking, and decorating still not done. Glenn greeted me at the salon door with a half-hearted side hug. I followed him to his station and looked around the salon. Someone had sprayed the birdhouses that sat on the shelf year-round with a coat of fake snow. A single strand of colored lights blinked tiredly in a half-dead peace lily on the floor. There was a handful of silver icicles hanging in a clump on one of the branches of a 2-foot artificial tree that held only 5 ornaments. A plastic 3-legged deer in the corner fell over as if it couldn't handle the shame of being a part of this pitiful tableau. I sat down in the chair and sighed. I am so tired. But I'm supposed to single-handedly make Christmas magic happen. And what's wrong with you? I snarled as he fastened the slick black cover-up behind my neck and twirled me around to face the mirror. Oh, I don't know, he started. Every year it's the same thing. I spend too much money on gifts and then I have to go to Mother's and do all the cooking. Nobody appreciates it. And what do I get in return? Presents that never see the light of day after they leave my car. They go straight into my apartment dumpster, happy to be put out of their misery. One year, sister number 2 gave everybody in the family a special knife you keep in your car in case you have a wreck and have to cut yourself out of the vehicle. Nothing says Christmas like a concealed weapon. And if I'm in a wreck so bad that the jaws of life need to be used, I'm thinking, I'll be all laid out about to croak. So how am I supposed to help myself from the inside with what amounts to a can opener? And the year before, she gave us all those wraparound sunglasses like cataract patients wear. Did I mention none of us has had cataracts? We all sat there looking like a throwback to the 60s on a 3D movie night. Then there's the Christmas I got 3 crock pots, all from my relatives that live within 20 miles of each other. You'd think they would consult. So now I have my black funeral crock pot, my silver wedding shower crock pot, and my elegantly understated all-occasion beige crock pot. Cheese dip for $500, anyone? Yeah, I just can't get into it either, I whined. Things have gotten so commercial. Kids pick out what they want and expect it to all appear before them. Their parents and grandparents just point and pay for merchandise like robots. And people are getting so rude, he added. No such thing as peace on earth. As we chattered on, Glenn's voice and my hair got higher and higher. Now, I had the kind of hair that Southern hairdressers dream about. Long, thick, curly, huge hair. Carrot Top, Shaka Khan, Diana Ross, and Rosanna Dana could only aspire to having hair as big and as wild as mine. I'd let my guard down today. Usually, I knew better than to bring up a subject that would get Glenn fired up because he would tease and talk as my hair got bigger and bigger and out of control. And there's no divinity at Christmas anymore, he went on. I chimed in, yeah, no divinity at all. No Christ child, no God, no Joseph and Mary, no divinity at all. No, he protested. I mean the candy. Nobody bothers to make homemade divinity anymore. I hate that. I looked over my reading glasses. Well, Brother Glenn, glad you got your Sunday school lesson right. I think it does say somewhere in the Gospel of Matthew, God sent his only son, so once a year you can eat a log of sugary white goo. He gently slapped my shoulder with a hand towel. I just miss all that stuff. It doesn't cost a lot of money to whip up a little homemade candy and sing carols outside and have a little family fun. It helped you get into the spirit. It sure made you feel, well, festive. Hey, don't get so worked up. The more excited you get, the bigger my hair gets. I've got the company party tonight, and you made it so big. Do I look like a slut? He busied himself cleaning combs and never looked up. Just enough, honey, just enough. Christmas came and went, big hair and all. Several months later, my dad died. Glenn showed up at my house with the funeral crock pot. I opened the door to his gentle knock. I'm not coming in, just take this. It's chicken and dumplings, and here's some cornbread. God, that smells good, I replied. I know, I cook like an old black Delta woman. Just eat it and shut up. He showed up the next day with the all-occasion pot full of glorious, nurturing beans and ham. As he held the pot out to me, I thought back to that appointment before Christmas and the conversation we had had, and in a flash I realized what Glenn had meant, how we let the busyness and the stuff push us away from each other and away from the heart of Christmas. I took the pot with a simple thanks, closed the door, and said a thank you. God bless the old Southern women that know how to turn comfort food into healing. And God bless the young boys they teach to do the same, especially how to create real divinity, not just at Christmas, but every day of the year. Zeek Taylor is a recipient of the Arkansas Governor's Art Award for Lifetime Achievement. Best known as a visual artist, he is also a storyteller and author. He has performed on the NPR show Tales from the South. A StoryCorps interview with Zeek is on file in the Library of Congress, and a segment of the interviews has aired on NPR's Morning Edition. He is the author of 4 books that include Chimps Having Fun and Out of the Delta, the anthology. His Out of the Delta book is listed on the Arkansas and Mississippi Delta Heritage website among the 20 autobiographies written by authors living in or from the Delta. We're all proud of him. Here's Zeke.
Thank you. Sears and Roebuck. I was a child in the 50s, and my first memory of Sears was when I looked through the retail company's Christmas catalog. It was also known as the Wish Book, and it arrived several weeks before the holiday. Descriptive text and photographs in the catalog described every toy currently made that a child could possibly want from Santa. My sisters and I searched through the toy section to pick out the wants. We took turns looking through the catalog. We didn't argue over it in case Santa was watching and taking notes about impolite behavior. The wait for my turn sometimes seemed to be excruciatingly long. I thought, how long does it take for my sister to look at an old baby doll? After days of studying the pages, we would write our names on the items that we wanted Santa to bring to us. Because our list of desired gifts always got out of hand, my mother requested that we number the items with descending numerals to denote our favorites. I made certain the number 1 that I placed on my favorite toy was large and heavily circled. When finished, we gave the catalog to my mother, who turned it over to Santa. He then decided which toys to bring to us on Christmas morning. The regular Sears catalog that came through the mail was much larger than the company's Christmas catalog. At one time, Sears offered mail-order kit houses for sale through the catalog. Even though the company stopped selling the kits in 1940, it still offered nearly every item an American household needed to furnish a home. Besides the usual clothing items offered, one could also buy appliances, curtains, rugs, furniture, tools, and more. The earlier catalogs offered many items that would seem odd to purchase through the mail in today's market. At one time, Sears sold ponies, donkeys, bees, and chickens. I longed to order one of the purebred animals shown in the catalog. Several popular dog breeds were listed along with Siamese and Persian cats. No matter how badly I wanted a poodle from Sears, my parents said, "No, you have enough pets." When a new catalog arrived in the mail, my younger sister and I were allowed to cut up the old one and make paper dolls out of the photographs. We glued the cutout figures onto heavy construction paper with Elmer's glue. When the glue dried, we carefully cut around the figures. While my sister cut out paper dolls of girls and women, the figures I cut out from the catalog were photographs of animals. The first time I ordered from the catalog, I used the money I'd made from picking cotton. I was 12 years old. I ordered a stereo that could play both 45s and albums. I wanted to begin collecting albums and get a head start on my teen record collection. When I was 14, I used some of my cotton picking money to buy a red 125 Allstate motorbike straight out of the Sears catalog. It arrived in 2 large cardboard boxes. With my father's help, I put the bike together, poured gas into the tank, hopped on it, and immediately ran into a ditch. The bruises on my legs went away, but the dent remained in the fender and served as a reminder for me to be patient and cautious. Many of the items in my parents' home came from Sears. My father bought Sears Craftsman tools, and my mother had Cold Spot and Kenmore appliances. We wore clothes from Sears. Some of the items were bought directly from the company's brick-and-mortar store rather than the catalog. My family made frequent shopping trips to Memphis, and our first stop before heading to the city's downtown area was the Crosstown Sears store. The building that housed the store was huge and served as a company catalog merchandise distribution center, as well as a retail store. The shopping area occupied the first few floors, and access from floor to floor was via an escalator. My youngest sister and I spent our time while there riding up and down the moving stairs. The Memphis Sears store was a favorite shopping outlet for Gladys Presley, where she picked out some of the furnishings for Graceland, the home of her son Elvis. She considered Sears to be upscale. My family did too. Years later, shopping in the Memphis Sears store with my mother became a tradition the day after Thanksgiving. At the time, writing a check required 2 IDs. A credit card served as one. My mother did have a driver's license, and because she needed an additional ID, she reluctantly applied for and received a Sears credit card. We went to Sears in our annual holiday shopping trip, and she would use her one and only credit card. She used it on that day and only on that day to keep the card active. She paid her Sears bill immediately the day it came in the mail. She didn't believe in credit cards, but she did believe in Sears. I eventually got a poodle, but it didn't come from Sears. We're thrilled tonight that Eureka Springs' own Pearl Brick is here as our special guest storyteller. She's been a fixture on the Northwest Arkansas music scene for decades and is known for telling tales through her original songs. No stranger to the stage, she began performing in Nashville at the age of 16. Tonight, she's going to show us another side of her many talents and entertain us with an original story. Here's my friend Pearl.
I've been a little lightheaded today. I'm not sure why. This is totally different than singing to me. And so now I'll shut up and just read this story. This is called The Christmas Fence. My mama, Lou, made Christmas so magical and full of mystery that I still think anything could happen on that day. When I wrote to Santa every year, I asked for a horse until I saw my Aunt Katie eat the cookies and drink the milk on Christmas Eve. I mean, she was unmistakable. I told no one, not even my little sister Susie Cute. It would have ruined it for her. Darrell, my daddy, and Lou were farm folk who lived through the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. Rowell Heath, my grandpa, lost the family farm and became a tenant farmer, fixing up farms that people had lost to the bank and then moving to the next one when that farm sold. My daddy rode a horse to school in a starched white shirt and blue jeans. Lou had 19 brothers and sisters, and when their parents went to town, they hauled the mattresses outside and jumped out of the trees onto them like monkeys. These were families that made their own phone, and they struggled with everything, and pets were not a luxury that they could afford. I was born in the city, and I wanted a farm and all the animals that came with it. The first time I brought an animal home, it was my friend Sharon's fault. Sharon announced at school one day that her cat had surprised the family with orange-striped kittens. Born last night? I made arrangements immediately to go to her house the very next day. I'd never been to Sharon's house, but I knew that she lived close because we both walked to school. That night, I told my mom that I had to stay after school the next day with Mrs. Baskett, our first grade teacher, because I was going to help her grade papers. Anyway, every Tuesday for 5 weeks, I went to Sharon's house. I lied to my mother, and we played with my kitten, Thomas. Thomas was a glorious orange tabby who knew his name. He knew how to use the litter box and he loved me as I loved him. I took him home on a Friday, and I hid him in my closet all weekend. On Monday, when I got home from school, he was gone. My parents were shocked at my prolonged grieving. And when I was 7, I brought home Licorice, a black spaniel puppy. I was allowed to keep her. Licorice was not to be an inside dog. We did not have a fence, but I was doing a very good job of keeping her close. It was summertime, and I spent the days with her until she took one of our next-door neighbor's house shoes. They left it in the carport by the kitchen door. Licorice had to go. The pound was called and showed up at our house on Cypress Avenue to pick her up. My daddy promised that he would build a fence and then I would get a puppy. When I was almost 8, I watched my dad put the latch on the gate of a tall wooden fence that went all the way around our backyard. All 5 of us were in the '65 Rambler, packed to move across the country when my daddy finished the fence. That picture is burned in my brain. It was a promise that was kept too late. We were moving from Stockton, California, where my dad had started 2 Southern Baptist churches, to Nashville, Tennessee, so he could work at the Baptist Sunday School Board. My folks bought a huge brick house in Donaldson, Tennessee. It was on a corner lot that could have held a horse or a dog if it had been fenced. Now I understand how my dad might have felt he spent money on a fence never used by the girl that he built it to please. The cost of fencing that huge yard would have been challenging for a man with 5 kids and a brand new job, even if his wife was the famous Mama Lou. The animals I gathered there would all have to be let go eventually. No fence and no promise of a fence. And still I collected them to me. Princess was a rat terrier mix, and she was my joy and my heart, and she stayed close, but when Daddy realized that she was with puppies, she had to go. The first time I had a pet for its whole life was a puppy stolen from a backyard in Key West. That's another story. The puppies were sick and covered in scabs, and they were starving. I got Jazz and I bathed her in the ocean every day. She went everywhere with me. She looked sort of like a wolverine, and she curled up under the stool that I sang on every night. When my future husband and I moved to the Ozarks, I remember telling Jazz to load up, and she climbed the mountain of our possessions in the 1953 Ford pickup and laid down on it like it happened every day. Kind of reminded me of the Beverly Hillbillies. I did eventually get a horse when I was 37 and pregnant with our last child. Shine was a solid black Tennessee walking horse. She was in foal, and she delivered her filly on our farm outside of Nashville. We moved Shine to Eureka Springs, and so my youngest child, Pinky, got to grow up on the Kings River on horseback. When Pinky was 10, she got a horse and a puppy for Christmas. She wasn't overwhelmed at all. Shine was 3 when I got her and 18 when I had to let the horses go after moving to Fayetteville, and I couldn't afford to board the horses. I bought a house in Eureka Springs in October of this year. Today I'll take Ruby, who's a rescue pity mix, and Rita, a goofy golden doodle red heeler pandemic puppy, to town. They're going to check out the fence I had put up in my backyard. The fence is a Christmas present to myself and my dogs. Merry Christmas to y'all. I hope you have all that you wish for. Thanks.
Wonderful. Next we have Zeek with another great story.
The following story is about my time spent on a movie set and a small part that I play in the film. The movie is a Lionsgate production, and the theatrical release of the movie will take place this coming January 26 in more than 1,100 locations nationwide. Here's my story. Wildfire on the set. After several months of delays that were partially caused by the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, 2 scenes in a movie that I was to appear in were finally going to be filmed. Based on the Native American legend about a ghost horse, combined with elements from the 70s hit song Wildfire, the movie was finally scheduled to be filmed in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Although I knew I would have very little screen time while speaking my few lines, I was excited about being in a full-length film and one that was going to have widespread distribution. I did have a little film experience. I had appeared in a commercial for a national yarn company, had a non-speaking role in a Hallmark movie, was in a music video, 1 short comedic movie, and a few other projects. I did worry that my limited experience had in no way prepared me for being in a full-length film. The movie titled Wildfire, The Legend of the Cherokee Ghost Horse, was being directed by Eric Parkinson and was to star Chevelle Shepherd in the lead. Chevelle had previously been the winner of The Voice, a television singing competition. Veteran actor Anne Hesh had also been hired to be in the movie. I knew that there would be a sizable crew on set, and I was nervous about my small part in the movie's final scene. What if I flubbed up my lines in front of a large group of professional movie people? I had received the scene schedule and a copy of my few lines a few weeks before the shoot was to take place. I was instructed to bring 2 sets of clothes because I was to appear in 2 scenes that in the movie would take place on different days. I was asked to bring a cowboy hat. The character I was going to play was a photographer who worked for the Tahlequah Daily Press. I was going to be paid SAG wages for the movie role. Prior to filming, the director contacted me and said they needed someone to act as my assistant, and he asked if my partner Dick would be interested in the role. Dick said yes. He was to receive payment as an enhanced extra, and he too was asked to wear a cowboy hat. The next day, we went to a tractor supply store that had a western wear section, and we bought the hats. Several days before the shoot, I rehearsed my lines over and over. I knew them backwards and forwards. I woke up each morning silently rehearsing my lines in my head before I got out of bed. I'd recite them out loud while preparing lunch and while watering the garden. I could see the lines perfectly, but every once in a while, I would mess up. I would say, "It's for the Tahlequah Daily News," instead of saying the correct line, "It's for the Tahlequah Daily Press." I thought one little damn word could cause me a lifetime of embarrassment. Dick assured me that I would be able to do my part perfectly. I wasn't so sure. We left Eureka early on a Saturday to make the 2.5-hour trip to Tahlequah, Oklahoma rodeo grounds, where the scenes were to be shot. The first scene we were to be in was scheduled to shoot at 1:30. We were greeted by the director, who told us they were running an hour behind schedule. I had an extra hour to rehearse my lines and to be nervous. Finally, it was time for the scene, and after only 2 takes, the director said, "Good job, we do not need to do it again." A day later, on social media, he said that I had nailed my performance. I was in additional scenes at night that were filmed around a massive bonfire. By then, I was at ease on set, and the rest of the speaking lines were ad-libbed ones that required no memorization, and there were no nerves on my part. I was relaxed and having fun. Both Dick and I enjoyed our time on set. I left Tahlequah feeling good about my tiny part in the movie, but I also left knowing I was not a threat to the career of Brad Pitt. And I'm going to welcome back Sandra, my friend, yada, yada, yada. Here's Sandra.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. This story is called Saving a Spirit. As soon as I stepped off the plane, I felt relief. My shoulders relaxed back into my frame, and the churning in my belly disappeared. The plan was that I'd visit for the holiday, then my husband and I would return later in the year, since this was his busiest season at work. Although my parents and their home had never been a haven for peace and tranquility, they provided the comfort of familiarity and predictability. What was intended as a 2-week visit over my Christmas vacation from my newly transferred to Urban University stretched into a more permanent stay. Paralyzed by depression, anxiety, and fear, I was unable to return to the life in Houston I shared with my husband of not quite 2 years. When we married, I was a young 19, having been raised to be nice and to do what others had told me. I had mistaken respect for his outstanding academic achievement, empathy for his difficult upbringing, and admiration of his strong work ethic for love. I never asked myself if this man gave me joy. I didn't know I was entitled to ask. The answer would have been a resounding no. I suspect that he mistook my agreeable nature and distaste for conflict as a good basis for marriage, even love. I had wandered down the path of saying yes to marrying after my sophomore year and his graduation and his subsequent career as a CPA. Our move to Houston was determined by a close your eyes and throw a dart method, since he was the state's top scorer on the CPA exam ever and had multiple job offers. It was not long before I found myself in an urban jungle which then had the distinction of being murder capital of the U.S. I was stalked at my neighborhood post office, driving all over the huge expanse of greater Houston until I finally lost the man with the shifty eyes. There were tree roaches big as Buicks, too much concrete, and too many people with more money than sense. My marriage was lacking in affection, humor, and joy, and rife with control, domination, and fear. I was being groomed to be a smiling, compliant corporate wife, while my inner spirit was barefoot artist flower child. My new spouse had wrapped himself in emotional armor to protect himself against closeness and vulnerability. He grew up in a joyless home, headed by his embittered father, who had survived a concentration camp, and after liberation moved his family to America. His father's very understandable bitterness translated to his family as wrath, cruelty, and harsh control. On visits to our home, his father spoke in German, obviously in ridicule of me, his new daughter-in-law. My husband declined to translate. He soon played out the toxic behavior that he had grown up with, mistaking it for being a good husband. I found myself slowly sinking into repetition of my parents' discordant marriage, except I refused to fight. It almost broke me. My 2-week break came and went. My return plane ticket expired, and I knew if I returned, I might not survive. At 21, I suddenly was back in the thorny nest with my parents. They were equally uncomfortable with my return to their home, but at the same time wanted to keep me under their thumbs. My mother was consumed with, what would everyone think? And I told her, I'm only important for a small gossip factor. People don't think about our family nearly as much as you suppose. There was consternation over whether to keep me underground or expose my return before friends discovered it. How to keep an adult daughter under the roof and away from what they feared was the inevitable, promiscuous life of a divorcee, and how to deal with the embarrassment of a child who, in their minds, had failed them. Since I had left with money and belongings for only a 2-week stay, I got a temporary job at an insurance company and took my friend up on her offer to rent her spare room. My mother was furious, realizing that was the end of her control. Her fantasies about my life far exceeded the reality of an exhausting work week and lack of friends. My goal was to work until fall, then to get back into school and back on track for the life I originally wanted as a designer and artist, Barefoot artist, flower, child, spirit. The divorce was amicably settled, and my dad drove me to Houston to pick up my belongings. I wanted nothing that was jointly accumulated. We walked into a hostile environment that had been set up with a handful of my ex-husband's friends glaring at us from the opposite side of the apartment complex's pool. My possessions were boxed and ready. We quickly loaded the car in the unbearable heat and humidity. The ex and I looked blankly at each other and said something like, "See ya," or "Good luck." Daddy murmured, "Let's get the hell out of here," and we did. After a few blocks, Dad, who rarely drank, pulled into a liquor store parking lot and came out with a six-pack, handed me a can, and took one for himself. Dang, I've never been anywhere this hot. We shared an unspoken toast to survival. Never before had a beer tasted so good, and for the first time in my life, sharing a beer with my dad, I felt like a grown-up. Making plans for a new life helped me to pull out of the depression. I found a part-time job as a dental assistant and registered for a light load at the university. I would return to familiar and happy surroundings, but with a new determination. I rented a room in a creaky old rooming house full of male students. I became their Snow White, and they became my several dwarfs. As often happens with that kind of living dynamic, they were protective and brotherly. One borrowed my size 3 purple velvet bell-bottoms for parties. One cooked Hawaiian for us, and they all marveled at how I could throw a football with a killer spiral. One 6-foot dwarf and I had been in the same friend circle before I left for my marriage, so we became running buddies and sort of mom and pop of the house. We did the little extras to make it feel a bit more like home. As a new Christmas drew near, we went to the woods and cut a tree, bought lights, icicles, and a few ornaments. We created a light show by lining up empty beer bottles and stuffing strings of blinking Christmas lights into them to shouts of "Far out," "Cool, man," and "Psychedelic." We found a small bird's nest in the tree, which denotes good luck. And then, every Christmas for the next 30 or so, he and I unwrapped that nest and placed it in our tree. Barefoot artist, flower child, Christmas spirit returned.
I want to thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Big thank you to our guest storyteller, Pearl Brick. Great story. She was so nervous, and I don't know why. It was so good, Pearl. And thanks again to Bews for letting us be here once again.
Our next show will be Wednesday, February 7th, so we are hoping that you will come and hear some more stories and hear some more great music.
You've been listening to Homegrown Tales, a live storytelling event held at Bews, 2 Pinted Spring in Eureka Springs. Join us again next time for more Homegrown Tales.